In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And in that endless conflict, few fates are more horrifying than what befalls a Dark Angel's Dreadnought when it falls into the crude green hands of the Orks. This is a tale of sacred honor desecrated, of ancient warriors reduced to playthings, and of the lengths an entire Space Marine chapter will go to reclaim or destroy what was once one of their most revered heroes. Picture, if you will, a battlefield somewhere in the Imperium's contested territories. The sky burns with the orange glow of burning promethium. The ground trembles under the weight of countless boots, tracks, and mechanized walkers. Among the Dark Angel's forces stands a towering figure, a walking shrine of adamantium and ceramite, bristling with weapons that have seen millennia of service. Inside its armored sarcophagus, suspended in amniotic fluid, floats what remains of a space marine who fell in battle centuries or even millennia ago. His broken body, reduced to little more than vital organs and a brain kept alive by arcane life support systems, serves the Emperor still. But today, something will happen that should never occur. Today, this walking monument to the Emperor's finest will fall. And worse, it will fall into hands that know nothing of honor, nothing of the sacred. Hands that see only scrap metal, weapons to be looted, and a really big toy to play with. This is not merely a tactical loss for the Dark Angels. This is a catastrophe that strikes at the very heart of their chapter's identity, their most guarded secrets, and their sacred duty to the Emperor. To understand why, we must delve deep into the nature of both the Dark Angel's dreadnoughts and the Orks who would dare to capture one. Throughout this exploration, we'll uncover the brutal reality of what happens when one of the Imperium's most honored warriors becomes a trophy for the galaxy's most violent and anarchic Xenos race. We'll witness the desecration, understand the response, and comprehend why this scenario represents one of the darkest possibilities in an already grimdark universe. The sacred nature of Dark Angels, dreadnoughts. To truly grasp the horror of an Ork-captured dreadnought, we must first understand what these war machines mean to the Dark Angels chapter. These are not merely weapons or vehicles. They are living relics, walking shrines that contain warriors who have served the Emperor for longer than entire human civilizations have existed. The Dark Angels, as the First Legion, possess some of the most ancient and revered dreadnoughts in the entire Imperium. These venerable ancients have witnessed battles that are now little more than legends, fought alongside heroes whose names are carved in the chapter's most sacred halls. Some have been in service since the Great Crusade itself, their pilots having stood beside the Primarch Lion L. Johnson when he walked among his sons in the flesh. The process of becoming a dreadnought is, itself, a form of martyrdom. When a Dark Angel Space Marine suffers wounds so catastrophic that even the advanced medical capabilities of the chapter's apothecaries cannot save him, a terrible choice must be made. If the warrior is deemed too valuable to lose, if his experience, tactical knowledge, and martial prowess are considered irreplaceable, he may be offered what the chapter considers the highest honor, eternal service within the armored shell of a dreadnought. But let us not romanticize this fate. The entombment process is nightmarish beyond mortal comprehension. The wounded warrior is stripped of all flesh deemed unnecessary for survival. Arms, legs, much of the torso are all cut away by the cold, precise instruments of the chapter's tech marines and visiting Adeptus Mechanicus priests. What remains is little more than a torso, vital organs, and crucially, the brain. This biological remnant is then hardwired directly into the dreadnought systems through neural interface ports that pierce what's left of the spine and skull. The sarcophagus itself becomes both prison and sanctuary, filled with nutrient-rich amniotic fluid that sustains the organic components, sealed with layers of ceramite and adamantium. It protects the fragile biology within, while simultaneously condemning it to an existence of sensory deprivation between battles. The warrior can no longer feel the wind on his face, taste food, or experience the simple pleasure of walking on his own two legs. Instead, his senses are now filtered through the Dreadnought systems. He sees through targeting auspex, hears through audio sensors, and feels through pressure sensors embedded in the armor plating. For a Dark Angel's Dreadnought, this existence is made even more complex by the chapter's terrible secret. The Dark Angels harbor a shame that they guard more zealously than any other secret in the Imperium. During the Horus Heresy, some of their own turned traitor. These fallen angels, scattered through time and space by the intervention of the Chaos Gods, are hunted by the Dark Angels and their successor chapters with an obsession that borders on madness. Many of the chapter's most ancient dreadnoughts know this secret. They were there when Caliban burned. They witnessed the betrayal firsthand. For 10,000 years, they have kept this knowledge locked within their armored tombs, sharing it only with those inducted into the inner circle. Between battles, when they are placed in stasis, sleep within the rock, their fortress monastery, these ancient warriors drift in darkness, their dreams haunted by memories of civil war and the brothers they once called friend who turned against them. The venerable dreadnoughts of the Dark Angels are thus more than weapons. They are living repositories of the chapter's history, guardians of its darkest secrets, and embodiments of its eternal quest for redemption. Some have been awakened and deployed specifically during hunts for the fallen, their ancient wisdom and tactical knowledge considered vital for such sacred missions. Others serve as advisors to the chapter's leadership, their counsel sought on matters of great importance. Each dreadnought bears the name of the hero entombed within, inscribed on scrolls of parchment sealed with wax and the chapter's sigils. Each is maintained with religious fervor by the chapter's tech marines, who treat every system check, every weapon servicing, every armor plate adjustment as a holy ritual. The machine spirits of these ancient walkers are considered among the most potent and temperamental in the chapter's arsenal, requiring constant propitiation through prayer and incense. When a dreadnought falls in battle, the chapter will move heaven and earth to recover the shell. Even if the pilot has finally achieved the death that had been denied him for centuries, his sarcophagus is retrieved with all the reverence due to a fallen hero. The armor is repaired, reconsecrated, and prepared to receive a new occupant when the need arises. The loss of a dreadnought's shell, let alone one with its pilot still alive inside, is considered a tragedy of monumental proportions. For a venerable dreadnought, particularly one privy to the chapter's inner circle secrets, to fall into enemy hands represents something far worse than a tactical setback. It represents a potential exposure of secrets that must never be revealed. It represents the desecration of a sacred warrior who has given everything, including his humanity, in service to the Emperor and the chapter. And most terrifyingly, it represents the possibility that what the dreadnought knows might be extracted, corrupted, or simply mocked by those unworthy to even speak his name. This is the context in which we must understand what happens when Orks capture such a machine. We are not talking about the loss of a tank or a weapons platform. We are talking about the capture of what is essentially a living saint of the chapter, a warrior who has served for longer than most mortal humans can imagine, who carries within his armored shell knowledge that could doom the Dark Angels to eternal shame if revealed. The nature of Ork salvage culture. Now we must turn our attention to the other side of this grim equation, the Orks. To understand what they will do with a captured dreadnought, we must first understand how these Xenos view technology, warfare, and the galaxy at large. Orks are, fundamentally, creatures of instinct and violence. They exist for one purpose: war. They live to fight to live, and find joy in nothing more than a good scrap. But beneath their brutish exterior and primitive behavior lies something far more complex and terrifying. Orks are actually incredibly sophisticated organisms, genetically engineered millions of years ago by the Old Ones during the War in Heaven to serve as soldiers in that ancient conflict. Within Ork society exists a caste system determined entirely by genetics and physiology. While all orcs are born to fight, certain orcs manifest specific traits that make them specialists. The mech boys, also known as mechaniacs or simply mechs, are the engineers of Ork society. They possess an innate, instinctive understanding of technology that is literally hardwired into their DNA. Without any formal training or education, a mech boy knows how machines work, how to build them, how to repair them, and most importantly, how to improve them to be more orky. This genetic knowledge manifests in a peculiar way. A mech boy doesn't learn engineering in the way a human tech marine studies with the Adeptus Mechanicus. Instead, the knowledge simply emerges from within them as they grow. They look at a pile of scrap metal and instinctively know that if they weld this bit to that bit, add some spikes here, a few more guns there, and paint it red to make it go faster, they'll have something that works. The fact that it shouldn't work, according to any known principles of physics or engineering, is irrelevant. To an orc, it works because they believe it will work, and the orc's collective psychic field, known as the War, makes their beliefs reality. This brings us to one of the most important aspects of Ork technology. It's partially powered by psychic energy. While Ork technology is generally functional on its own merits, the Warg field generated by large groups of Orks gives their ramshackle contraptions that extra push they need to operate beyond their physical capabilities. This is why Ork weapons are notoriously unreliable when used by non-Orks. Without the psychic field to supplement the crude engineering, they often fail to function at all. But don't mistake this for weakness. Ork technology, for all its crude appearance, can be devastatingly effective. Mech boys have been known to create weapons and vehicles that rival or even exceed Imperial equivalents in firepower and durability. The difference is that Ork technology looks cobbled together, sounds like it's about to fall apart, and often has no safety features whatsoever. An Ork weapon might explode when fired, but it also might fire 3 times as fast as it should and punch through armor that should be impervious to it. Central to Ork culture is the concept of looting. Orks are acquisitive to the point of kleptomania, and nowhere is this more evident than among the Deathskulls clan, who have elevated looting to a cultural identity. They believe that blue is the luckiest color, and they paint everything they own in garish shades of blue, from their skin to their vehicles to their weapons. Deathskulls are the most prolific looters in Ork society, with an almost supernatural ability to acquire anything that isn't nailed down, and quite a few things that are. When Orks loot enemy equipment, they don't simply use it as is. That would be un-Orky. Instead, they take whatever they've captured back to their mechs, who proceed to Orkify it. This process involves stripping away anything deemed unnecessary, adding more weapons, welding on armor plates covered in spikes and glyphs, painting it in clan colors, and generally making it look more Orky. The results are often terrifying amalgamations of Imperial, Xenos, and Ork technology that somehow manage to function despite violating every principle of engineering and safety. Ork battlefield salvage operations are remarkably efficient in their own chaotic way. Even during the thick of ongoing battle, Ork scrap teams will wade into the carnage to haul away damaged or abandoned enemy vehicles. They show no preference for the source of their scrap. Imperial tanks, Eldar grav vehicles, Tau battlesuits, even Necron constructs have all been subjected to Ork looting and modification. There's a legend among the Orks of a particularly skilled looter called Grabber Gootsbag, who supposedly looted an Imperial Titan, though whether this tale is true or merely Orkish braggadocio remains unclear. The most skilled mech boys are known as Big Mechs, and they command respect and fear in equal measure. A Big Mech can cobble together a functioning workshop from battlefield wreckage, even while bullets are still flying. Their abilities border on the miraculous, creating force fields that can withstand sustained fire, weapons that defy conventional physics, and vehicles that move and fight with surprising agility, despite looking like they should collapse into a heap of scrap at any moment. It's important to understand that orcs don't loot out of necessity alone. They loot because they enjoy it. They loot because using an enemy's own weapons against them is funny. They loot because a bigger gun is always better. And if that bigger gun used to belong to some humey or pointy-eared git, well, that just makes it even better when you use it to blow something up. The psychological satisfaction an orc derives from looting is almost as important as the practical benefits. This brings us to what happens when orcs encounter truly impressive technology. When an orc mech boy sees an Imperial Dreadnought, particularly one from a venerable chapter like the Dark Angels, his eyes light up with possibilities. Here is a target that combines everything an orc values. It's big, it's stompy, it's covered in guns, and it's really, really hard to kill. The challenge of bringing down such a machine is the kind of fight that orcs dream about, and if they can actually capture one intact, or mostly intact, that's the kind of prize that can make a mech boy's reputation for life. The orcs have their own versions of dreadnoughts called Death Dreads, but these are crude approximations built from scratch. The opportunity to get their hands on an actual Imperial Dreadnought represents something else entirely. It's a chance to study, modify, and improve upon technology that the orcs instinctively recognize as superior to their own ramshackle creations. It's an opportunity to create something truly orky by starting with something genuinely well made, and then making it better by adding more dakka, more armor, and making it all proper orky. But perhaps most importantly, from an orc's perspective, capturing an enemy dreadnought is just really, really funny. The idea of taking something the enemy holds sacred and turning it into an orc war machine tickles the orcish sense of humor in ways that few other prizes can. It's not just about the practical benefits, though those are substantial. It's about the sheer audacity of it, the bragging rights, and the knowledge that somewhere out there, some humies are absolutely furious about what happened to their precious walking tomb. The battlefield scenario. How capture occurs. So how does such a catastrophic event actually occur? How do orcs manage to capture something as formidable and well protected as a Dark Angel's dreadnought? The answer lies in the chaos of war, the overwhelming numbers orcs can bring to bear, and occasionally, sheer bad luck. Let us imagine the scene. The planet is contested territory, a world that holds something valuable to both the Imperium and the orcs. Perhaps it's a forge world with valuable manufacturing capabilities, or an agri-world whose food production feeds nearby systems, or simply a strategically important location that neither side can afford to let the other hold. The Dark Angels have deployed a strike force to liberate or defend the world, and among their forces is a venerable dreadnought, an ancient warrior who has fought in countless battles across millennia of service. The battle begins as most do, with the orcs charging forward in a massive green tide of bodies, bikes, and ramshackle vehicles. They're whooping, hollering, firing their crude weapons with wild abandon, and generally making as much noise as possible. The Dark Angels respond with precise, devastating fire. Bolt rounds slam into orc flesh. Lascannons lance through improvised armor. The dreadnought itself wades into the melee, its assault cannon roaring, its power fist crushing orc bodies with contemptuous ease. For a time, it seems the battle will go as expected. The Dark Angels are warriors bred for war, their tactics honed by millennia of experience. The dreadnought is a bastion of firepower and resilience, an anchor around which their battle line forms. But orcs don't fight like other races. They don't retreat when they should, don't slow down when facing overwhelming firepower, and they certainly don't respect the reputation of their enemies. They just keep coming, wave after wave of green-skinned monstrosities who view death in battle as the best possible outcome. The orcs begin to adjust their tactics, such as they are. Some orc warboss, smarter or luckier than most, realizes that the big metal Humie Walker is the key to breaking the enemy line. He bellows orders, gathering his biggest and meanest boys, his knobs in mega armor, and any orcs with rocket launchers or other heavy weapons. The target is clear. Bring down the dreadnought. What follows is a concentrated assault that would break most defenses. Rockets streak through the air, impacting against ceramite armor in cascades of fire and shrapnel. Tankbuster boys, orcs specialized in destroying vehicles, press forward with their specialized weapons. Big mobs of boys swarm around the Dreadnought's legs, trying to bog it down through sheer weight of numbers. Some carry power claws, crude but effective weapons that can tear through even Space Marine armor with enough force behind them. The Dreadnought fights magnificently. Its weapons speak death with every burst of fire. Orks are pulped by its power fist, crushed beneath its armored feet, incinerated by its flame weapons. The pilot, ancient and experienced, directs the machine with precision, born of centuries of warfare. He is a veteran of the Long War, a warrior who has fought orcs before and knows their tactics, their weaknesses, their predictable unpredictability. But orcs are nothing if not persistent, and their numbers seem endless. For every 10 that fall, 20 more rush forward to take their place. The war field is strong here, fueled by the excitement and bloodlust of thousands of orcs, all focused on the same goal: kill the big metal Humie. The air itself seems to thicken with psychic energy, making orc weapons hit harder, making their ramshackle armor slightly more resistant, making them just a bit more dangerous than they should be. The turning point comes from multiple angles, simultaneously. A lucky shot from a big mech's custom mega blaster punches through a weakened section of armor, damaging one of the Dreadnought's primary weapon systems. At almost the same moment, a mob of knobs manages to reach the walker's legs, their power claws tearing at hydraulics and support structures. The Dreadnought stumbles, its gyroscopic stabilizers struggling to maintain balance under the sustained assault. The Dark Angels around their ancient warrior fight desperately to create space, to push back the Orks and give their honored brother room to recover. But the Orks sense blood in the water now. More mob after mob pile in, drawn by the spectacle of the big fight and the prospect of being the one who finally brings down the metal giant. Explosive charges are slapped onto armor plates. Rockets impact with increasing frequency. The accumulated damage begins to tell. Another critical hit, this one striking the Dreadnought's power plant shielding. Alarms blare in the sarcophagus as radiation warnings flash across internal displays. The pilot knows he's in trouble, but continues fighting, because that's what Dreadnoughts do. They fight until they can no longer fight, and then they keep fighting anyway. His tactical display shows Dark Angel's squads being pushed back, his supporting infantry overwhelmed by sheer numbers. He's becoming increasingly isolated, a lone island of resistance in a green sea. Then comes the catastrophic moment. A massive explosion, probably several rockets hitting simultaneously, strikes the Dreadnought's knee joint. Structural supports shear away. The ancient walker topples, crashing to the ground with a thunderous impact that cracks the earth beneath it. The pilot, disoriented by the fall and the cascade of damage reports flooding his systems, tries to bring weapons to bear even from the prone position. But orcs are already swarming over the fallen giant, their crude tools and weapons attacking every joint, every vulnerable point they can find. What happens next happens fast. More orcs pile on, not just to attack but to restrain. They understand that this prize is too valuable to destroy if they can help it. Chains are thrown over weapon arms. Massive spanners and wrenches are jammed into articulation points. Some particularly brave or stupid orcs try to pry open armor plates to get at the squishy bits inside. The Dreadnought thrashes, trying to rise, trying to fight, but the accumulated damage and the sheer weight of orcs holding it down prove too much. The Dark Angels, seeing their ancient brother fallen, launch desperate counterattacks. They know what will happen if the orcs drag that Dreadnought away. They know the shame, the horror, the terrible necessity of what must be done. Terminators teleport directly into the orc mob, their stormbolters roaring. Tactical squads execute precision strikes, trying to reach the fallen Dreadnought. But the orcs, scenting victory, defend their prize with unusual tenacity. More orcs keep coming, and some of them are specifically tasked with dragging the dreadnought away. This is where orc industrial efficiency, such as it is, comes into play. A massive battle wagon or truck is brought up, along with whatever lifting equipment the mechs have cobbled together. The dreadnought, still active but unable to effectively resist, is hauled onto the transport with much shouting, arguing, and occasional infighting over who gets to sit on the shiny new trophy. The vehicle roars away, heading back toward orc lines, its cargo representing one of the greatest prizes any orc mech could hope for. Inside his sarcophagus, the pilot experiences a new kind of horror. His external senses show him being dragged away from his battle brothers, away from the warriors he's fought beside, away from everything he's known. His vox channels are filled with desperate calls, his battle brothers trying to reach him, to coordinate a rescue, to at least confirm his status. But the orcs are already jamming communications, and distance is growing rapidly. The last thing his sensors register before orc mechs begin forcibly shutting down his systems is the sight of Dark Angel's warriors fighting through waves of orcs, trying desperately to reach him and failing. Then, as his power systems are cut off one by one, as crude orc tools begin prying at interface ports and access panels, he enters a different kind of darkness. Not the peaceful stasis sleep he's known between battles, but an awareness of being helpless, surrounded by aliens, being transported to some unknown location for some unimaginable purpose. For a warrior who has served for centuries, who has faced death countless times without fear, this helplessness is perhaps the worst fate imaginable. Back on the battlefield, the Dark Angels are left with a horrifying reality. One of their most ancient and honored warriors has been captured. Worse, if this was a venerable dreadnought privy to the inner circle's secrets, knowledge of the fallen may now be in orc hands. The implications are staggering. Every member of the inner circle knows what must be done. They must recover or destroy that dreadnought by any means necessary, no matter the cost. The orcification process begins. The captured dreadnought is hauled back to the orc camp amid great celebration and arguing. Orcs from every clan and mob want to see the prize, poke at it, argue about what should be done with it. But ultimately, the dreadnought's fate is in the hands of the mech boys, and specifically, whichever big mech is baddest enough to claim it. Let's call this big mech Grob Crusher for our purposes. Grob Crusher is a particularly large and skilled mech boy, his body covered in crude bionics, and his head containing just enough intelligence to be dangerous. When he sees the dreadnought, his eyes light up with that characteristic orcish glee. This is the kind of project that can make a mech's reputation. This is the kind of thing songs get written about, assuming orcs wrote songs that lasted more than 30 seconds before degenerating into fighting. The first challenge is simply getting the thing into his workshop. The workshop itself is a ramshackle affair, built from scavenged shipping containers, crashed Imperial aircraft, and whatever else the mechs could scrounge up. It's held together with rivets, spot welds, and what appears to be pure optimism. Inside, it's a chaotic mess of tools, parts, half-finished projects, and Gretchen running around stealing anything that isn't actively being used. The sound is deafening, hammering, welding, shouting, the occasional explosion, and the constant background roar of poorly maintained machinery. Grob Crusher gathers his best mechs and a small army of Gretchen laborers. The dreadnought is still partially active, its machine spirit angry and defiant. Every attempt to approach it is met with threatening movements from its weapon arms and what sounds like enraged mechanical growls emanating from its vox speakers. The first order of business is to properly immobilize it and shut down any systems that might pose a threat. This process is neither gentle nor precise. Heavy chains are wrapped around limbs and bolted to support columns. Power cables are severed with large cutting tools, showering sparks in all directions. Access panels are pried open with crowbars and powered wrenches. The dreadnought's machine spirit fights every step of the way, but without its primary power source, its resistance is limited. Eventually, Grobkrusha manages to access the main power systems and shut them down completely, plunging the war machine into total dormancy. But here's the horrifying part that we must confront directly. Inside that sarcophagus, the pilot is still alive, still conscious, or at least intermittently conscious. Without the Dreadnought's life support systems at full power, he's experiencing something close to sensory deprivation. The amniotic fluid in his chamber has stopped circulating properly. The temperature regulation is failing. The neural interface that normally translates his thoughts into the Dreadnought's actions has gone dark, leaving him trapped in a body that can't move, can't see, can't do anything except float in darkness and fear. This is the beginning of his true nightmare. In service to the Emperor, he accepted the fate of endless battle, of being awakened only to fight and placed in stasis between wars. That was a bargain he understood, a duty he embraced. But this is something no space marine, no matter how mentally conditioned, is prepared for. He's alive but helpless, aware but unable to act, trapped in the hands of Xenos who don't understand and don't care about the sanctity of what they've captured. Meanwhile, the mechs are getting to work. The first phase of orkification is stripping away Imperial iconography. This isn't done out of any ideological stance. Orks don't care about symbols of the Imperium except as potential loot. Rather, they need the space for their own glyphs and modifications. Every purity seal, every chapter badge, every inscription in High Gothic is either torn away or covered over. For Dark Angels, this desecration goes even deeper. The chapter's symbols are sacred, each one blessed by chaplains and carrying centuries of history. The winged sword, the symbol of the First Legion, is pried off and probably ends up as decoration on some Ork warboss's armor or trophy rack. The honor scrolls, inscribed with the Dreadnought's battle history, and the prayers that have sustained its machine spirit, are torn away and discarded as worthless paper. The nameplate, bearing the honored title of the warrior within, is removed to make room for whatever crude Orkish name the mechs decide to give their new toy. The technical modifications begin in earnest. Grobkrusha and his mechs approach this with the kind of enthusiasm only Orks can muster. They don't study the Dreadnought systems in any methodical way. They don't consult manuals or schematics. Instead, they rely on their genetic instinct for technology, poking and prodding at components until they figure out what does what. The weapons are the first target. An Ork always wants more Daka, so whatever weapons the Dreadnought carried are deemed insufficient. Maybe it had an assault cannon and power fist. The mechs remove these, not because they're bad weapons, but because they can be improved. The assault cannon is replaced with something they call a big shooter, which is essentially multiple heavy weapons welded together to fire simultaneously. Never mind that the mounting wasn't designed for this kind of stress, or that the ammunition feed is now a tangled mess of jury-rigged hoppers and conveyor belts. It'll work because the Orks believe it'll work, and the War field makes it so. The power fist might be replaced with a massive Dreadclaw, a crude but effective close combat weapon covered in rotating blades, spikes, and what looks like hydraulic rams that shouldn't be able to generate the force they somehow do. Or maybe they keep the power fist and just add more stuff to it, more blades, maybe a flamer or shooter built into the fist itself. Subtlety is not an Ork virtue. The armor receives similar treatment. Any section that's been damaged is patched with whatever metal plates the mechs can find. These patches are rarely the right size or shape, so they're cut, hammered, and welded into place. The result is a patchwork of Imperial ceramite, Ork plate metal, possibly sections from other vehicles, all riveted and welded together. It looks terrible, like it shouldn't provide any meaningful protection, but somehow the armor holds together and remains effective. Then comes the painting. Orks believe that different colors have different effects. Red makes things go faster, blue makes them lucky, yellow makes bigger explosions, black makes them tougher. The Dreadnought is going to get painted, probably in whatever colors correspond to the clan that captured it. If it was the Death Skulls, everything gets painted blue. If it was the Blood Axes, it might get camouflage patterns. though Ork camouflage tends toward slightly darker green rather than anything actually useful. If it was the Bad Moons, it'll probably be covered in yellow and gold paint, assuming they can afford that much paint. The painting process is done with the same care and attention to detail that Orks apply to everything, which is to say, none. Paint is slapped on with brushes, rollers, or just poured on and spread around. The result is messy, uneven, and thoroughly un-imperial. Where once stood a war machine painted in the proud colors of the Dark Angels, dark green and bone white, now stands something garish and offensive to the eye. But the mechs aren't done. Oh no. They need to add proper Orkish decorations. Glyphs are welded on, crude Orkish letters spelling out things like Def Stomper, or Bigun, or Grobe Crucia's favorite toy. Spikes are added because Orks love spikes. They serve no functional purpose whatsoever, but they look mean, and that's what matters. Chains are draped over the armor, dangling bits of previous victims' equipment. Maybe they bolt on the skull of some unfortunate enemy, or the helmet of a previous foe, or just random bits of debris because it looks proper Orky. Throughout this entire process, which might take days or even weeks, the pilot is intermittently conscious. The mechs occasionally power up portions of the Dreadnought systems to test their modifications, and during these moments, the pilot experiences brief windows of awareness. He can sometimes access his external senses, seeing through his own optics the horror of what's being done to his shell. He sees green-skinned Xenos crawling over his armor like vermin. He sees sacred symbols being defaced. He sees crude modifications that violate every principle of proper maintenance and respect for a war machine's machine spirit. Worse, he can sometimes hear. Orks are not quiet. They argue constantly, often breaking into violence over the most trivial disagreements. The pilot hears their guttural language, their crude humor, their complete lack of understanding or respect for what he is. They don't see him as a warrior who has served the Emperor for centuries. They see him as a really cool toy they get to play with. The psychological torture of this experience cannot be overstated. Space Marines are conditioned to withstand incredible physical and mental stress. They can endure torture, resist temptation, maintain their faith in the face of horrors that would break lesser beings. But this, being helpless, being modified, being turned into something that violates everything he's sworn to protect and uphold. There's no conditioning for this. No litany can make it bearable. No prayer can ease the horror. And perhaps worst of all, he knows what's coming. He knows that eventually, the Orks will power him back up completely. They'll activate his full systems, reconnect his neural interfaces, and try to make him walk and fight as an Ork war machine. The thought of his own body, his own systems, being used in service to Xenos against the Imperium, fills him with a fury and despair beyond words. If this Dreadnought pilot was privy to the Inner Circle's secrets, his horror multiplies further. He knows that he contains knowledge that must never fall into enemy hands. He knows the truth about the fallen, about the betrayal, about the Dark Angel's eternal shame. Even though Orks are unlikely to understand or care about such things, the mere possibility that he might be forced to speak, that his systems might be accessed, that he might be made to reveal what he knows, is unbearable. He tries to resist. Even in his powerless state, even trapped in his sarcophagus, he tries to resist. He attempts to will his own death, to somehow shut down his own biological functions, to achieve the Emperor's peace through sheer force of will. But the life support systems, crude and unreliable as they now are under Ork modification, continue to sustain him. His body, or what remains of it, is too resilient, too well designed to fail easily. He remains alive, remains conscious, remains trapped. The machine spirit of the Dreadnought itself is in turmoil. These ancient war machines develop a form of consciousness over their long years of service, a personality shaped by their pilot and their experiences. The machine spirit is enraged by what's being done to it. It tries to resist the Ork modifications, tries to reject the crude parts being grafted onto its systems. But machine spirits, for all their power, are bound by the physical reality of their hardware. As the Orks replace and modify components, as they override safety systems and install their own control mechanisms, the machine spirit finds itself increasingly unable to resist. Some tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus would say this is impossible, that a properly consecrated machine spirit cannot be corrupted or overridden so easily. But Orks have their own relationship with technology, one that operates on principles that have more to do with belief and psychic resonance than proper mechanical engineering. The Warfield can make things work that shouldn't work, and it can override machine spirits that should be inviolate. It's not corruption in the chaos sense. It's more like the machine is being drowned in a tide of Orky belief that overpowers its original purpose. As the modifications near completion, Grobkrusha stands back to admire his work. Where once stood a Dark Angel's Dreadnought, a sacred war machine of the Imperium, now stands something that barely resembles its original form. It's been painted, spiked, modified, and generally made to look as Orky as possible, while still maintaining its basic functionality. It's taller now, thanks to additional armor plates. It's bristling with more weapons than any reasonable engineer would think could be mounted on such a frame. It looks like it should fall apart at any moment, but Grobkrusha knows better. It'll work. It'll work because he made it. And he's a proper mech. The other Orks gathered to watch are impressed. They hoot and holler, argue about whether it needs more Daka or more spikes, and generally agree that this is going to be brilliant when it's finally up and running. Some argue about who should get to pilot it, until someone points out that there's already a Humi inside, and maybe they should see if they can make the Humi do the piloting. This idea is met with general approval because it's funny and cruel, two things Orks appreciate. Grobkrusha moves to the final stage. Full system activation. He's installed a control mechanism, a crude device that should, in theory, allow Orks to override the pilot's control of the Dreadnought. It probably won't work perfectly, because Ork technology rarely does, but it should work well enough for the pilot to be unable to completely resist. Power flows back into the Dreadnought's systems. Lights flicker on. The machine spirit stirs, confused and angry, and in his sarcophagus, the pilot feels the horrible return of sensation as his neural interfaces reconnect. He's back. He's aware. He can see, hear, feel through the Dreadnought systems. But everything is wrong. His sensors are feeding him garbled, Ork-modified data. His weapon systems don't respond the way they should. His motor controls are sluggish, fighting against Ork overrides. He tries to move his arm and finds it jerking in directions he didn't intend. He tries to speak, to curse the Xenos, to call out to the Emperor for strength, and what emerges from his vox speakers is distorted, corrupted, barely recognizable as Gothic. Grobkrusha laughs, a booming sound that echoes through the workshop. The Humi is awake, and he's fighting the controls, just like the mech thought he would. But the overrides are holding, mostly. The Dreadnought is lurching to its feet, its movements uncoordinated and jerky, but it's moving. The pilot inside is trying to resist, trying to shut himself down again, but the systems won't let him. He's trapped in a body that no longer fully obeys him, forced to participate in his own desecration. This is the moment where the full horror of the situation becomes clear to the pilot. He's not just captured, he's not just modified. He's been turned into an Ork weapon, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. He can fight the controls, can resist with every ounce of will he possesses, but the Orks don't need his cooperation. They just need his body, his shell, his systems. They're going to use him whether he wants it or not. And somewhere, deep in his consciousness, past the rage and horror and despair, a terrible thought emerges. What if this is how the Fallen felt when they turned traitor? What if they felt this same loss of control, this same corruption of everything they once believed in? The thought is blasphemous, but in his current state, clarity and dogma have both been stripped away. All that remains is suffering and the knowledge that he's become something that should never have existed. The orkification is complete. What was once a Dark Angel's Dreadnought, a walking shrine to the Emperor and the First Legion, has been transformed into a twisted mockery of itself. And the worst part, it still works. The pilot is still inside. The machine still functions. It's just serving a very different purpose now, and there's nothing its original owner can do about it. The Dark Angel's response. Back in Dark Angel's territory, the response to the Dreadnought's capture has been swift and severe. The moment communication was lost and the capture confirmed, protocols established millennia ago were immediately activated. This is not merely a tactical setback to be reported and dealt with in due course. This is a crisis that strikes at the very heart of what the Dark Angels are and what they guard. Within the strike force that lost the Dreadnought, reactions are immediate and visceral. The company master who was leading the engagement goes into a state of cold fury that his subordinates find more terrifying than any mere anger. He immediately orders all available units to pursue the Orks who captured the Dreadnought. Consequences be damned. Other objectives are abandoned. Tactical advantages are given up. The entire strategic situation is secondary to one imperative: recover or destroy that Dreadnought. But the initial pursuit fails. The Orks, for all their apparent lack of sophistication, can be surprisingly effective at covering their retreat when they have something valuable to protect. They've already anticipated that the Dark Angels will come after their prize, and they've prepared accordingly. Rearguard actions, improvised minefields of crude explosives, and the sheer confusion of the battlefield all conspire to prevent the Dark Angels from catching the Orks before they disappear into whatever warren of defenses they call home. News of the capture reaches the Rock, the Dark Angels' fortress monastery, within hours. The Rock is not merely a space station or ship. It's a piece of the Dark Angels' original homeworld of Caliban, transformed into a mobile fortress that contains the chapter's most sacred places, deepest secrets, and oldest warriors. Buried within the Rock are chambers that no outsider has ever seen, libraries that contain the true history of the chapter, and dungeons where captured fallen are interrogated by interrogator chaplains. The Supreme Grand Master, the chapter's leader and highest-ranking member of the Inner Circle, receives the news personally. His reaction is carefully controlled, as befits one of his station, but those who know him well can see the tension in his posture, the slight tightening around his eyes. He immediately convenes an emergency meeting of the Inner Circle, calling together the masters of the chapter's companies, its most senior chaplains and librarians, and the Deathwing and Ravenwing commanders. The meeting takes place in one of the Rock's most secure chambers, where even the walls are warded against scrying and surveillance. What is discussed here must never be known to outsiders. The Supreme Grand Master lays out the situation with brutal clarity. A venerable Dreadnought has been captured by Orks. If it was merely a standard Dreadnought, the response would still be significant, but this is worse. This was one of the Ancients, one of the Dreadnoughts that knows the truth about the Fallen. The implications are discussed with the grim efficiency of warriors who have spent millennia dealing with worst-case scenarios. Can the pilot resist indefinitely if the Orks attempt some form of interrogation? Probably, but the Orks' methods are unpredictable. Can the machine's databanks be accessed to reveal chapter secrets? Possibly, though the encryption and protective measures should prevent casual examination. Can the Dreadnought be forced to fight against the Imperium? Almost certainly yes, given enough time and the right modifications. But the greatest fear isn't what the Orks might learn. Orks aren't known for sophisticated intelligence gathering, and even if they extracted every secret from the Dreadnought's databanks, they'd probably just think it was boring Humie stuff not worth paying attention to. The real fear is what might happen if the Dreadnought is recovered by someone else. If another Imperial force finds it, if the Inquisition gets involved, if anyone outside the Inner Circle gains access to an ancient Dark Angel's Dreadnought that has been in Ork hands, The questions that would be asked could expose everything. Worse still is the simple matter of honor. The Dark Angels are the First Legion, the Emperor's chosen, warriors who carry themselves with pride that borders on arrogance. To have one of their most honored warriors captured, desecrated, and potentially used as a weapon by Xenos is an insult that cannot be borne. Every Dark Angels warrior who learns of this capture feels it as a personal affront, a stain on their honor that can only be cleansed through action. The Supreme Grand Master issues his orders. All available forces are to be redirected toward the recovery or destruction of the captured Dreadnought. The Ravenwing, the chapter's second company specializing in fast attack and reconnaissance, is to locate the Ork position and maintain surveillance. The Deathwing, the first company composed entirely of Terminators and privy to the chapter's deepest secrets, is to prepare for immediate deployment. Other companies currently engaged elsewhere are to disengage and redirect to the theater where the capture occurred. These orders represent a significant commitment of resources, one that will leave other operations undermanned and potentially compromise other objectives. The Supreme Grand Master doesn't care. Some things are more important than tactical victories or strategic gains. Some things strike at the soul of the chapter and must be addressed no matter the cost. The loss of a Dreadnought is one of those things. But the orders go further than simple military deployment. Interrogator chaplains are tasked with preparing themselves for the possibility that they might need to grant the Emperor's peace to one of their own. Tech Marines are briefed on the specific systems of the captured Dreadnought, given whatever intelligence can be gathered about its current state. Librarians are instructed to attempt psychic communion with the captured warrior, to try to reach his mind across whatever distance separates them, to offer what comfort can be provided, and to assess his condition. The Ravenwing moves first. These warriors, mounted on bikes and in fast attack vehicles, are experts at reconnaissance and pursuit. They deploy to the planet's surface within hours of receiving their orders, spreading out in squadrons that cover vast areas of territory. They're not looking just for the Dreadnought itself. They're looking for any indication of where the Orks might have taken it, any traces of the enemy's movements, any intelligence that might narrow down the search area. The hunt is complicated by the nature of Ork territories. Orks don't build orderly bases with clear boundaries and logical layouts. They create sprawling, chaotic warrens that grow organically as more Orks arrive and start building whatever they feel like building. Workshops are interspersed with barracks, which are next to vehicle depots, which are under ammunition dumps, all connected by winding paths that make no sense to anyone but the Orks themselves. From above, Ork settlements look like some sort of industrial cancer, spreading across the landscape with no plan or purpose beyond more growth. The Ravenwing begins systematic surveillance, using augers and auspex to penetrate the crude structures. They're looking for specific energy signatures, the kind that a Dreadnought's power plant would generate. They're listening on various frequencies for any communications that might indicate the captured machine's location. They're watching Ork movements, looking for any indication that the Xenos are gathered around something particularly interesting. This process takes time, days, or even weeks. Orks are numerous, and their territories are vast. The planet's surface is littered with multiple Ork camps, some larger than imperial cities, others just small clusters of crude shelters around a particularly successful war boss. Each one is a potential hiding place for the captured Dreadnought. Each one must be investigated, ruled out, or marked for further attention. While the Ravenwing searches, the Deathwing prepares. These Terminators, clad in bone-white armor that marks their status as members of the chapter's inner elite, are the Dark Angels' most veteran warriors. Every member of the Deathwing knows the truth about the Fallen. Every one of them has sworn oaths to recover or destroy these traitors, no matter the cost. They understand implicitly why the recovery of this Dreadnought is so important, why it takes precedence over all other considerations. The Deathwing's preparation is thorough and methodical. They review intelligence on Ork defenses and tactics. They practice breaching techniques designed to penetrate fortified positions quickly and violently. They coordinate with the Ravenwing on extraction routes and support protocols. Most importantly, they prepare themselves mentally and spiritually for what they might find. If the Dreadnought has been too corrupted, too modified, too far gone to be recoverable, they must be ready to destroy it. This is not merely a matter of putting down an enemy asset. It's ending the suffering of a brother who has served the chapter for longer than most of them have been alive. The chaplains have their own preparations. They craft the words they'll speak if destruction becomes necessary, the benedictions that will send an ancient warrior to his final rest. They prepare absolutions for the warriors who might have to pull the trigger, who might have to be the ones to end a hero's existence. These are not easy prayers to write, not comfortable words to contemplate speaking, but the chaplains understand their duty, and they will not flinch from it. Meanwhile, the librarians attempt their psychic communion. This is dangerous work, even for trained psychers. The warp is treacherous, and reaching out across vast distances to touch a specific mind is like trying to find one specific drop of water in an ocean. But the librarians try anyway, because there's a chance, however small, that they can reach the captured pilot, can offer him strength, can assess his condition. Some report fleeting contacts, brief moments where they feel they've touched something that might be the lost warrior's consciousness. What they feel isn't encouraging. There's rage, certainly, the fury of a warrior who refuses to be broken. But there's also despair, a kind of hollow horror that speaks to sustained suffering and helplessness. One librarian reports sensing something even more disturbing, the feeling of the pilot's consciousness being intermittently suppressed or overridden, as if something external is controlling his actions against his will. This report is particularly troubling, suggesting that the Orks have succeeded in creating control mechanisms that can force the Dreadnought to operate under their command. As the search continues, tensions run high throughout the Dark Angel's forces on planet. Every warrior knows what's at stake. Every one of them understands that this is not merely about recovering a valuable war machine. It's about honor, about loyalty to those who have served, about protecting the chapter's deepest secrets. The usual stoic discipline of the Dark Angels takes on an almost brittle quality, as if the entire force is wound too tight, ready to explode into violence at any moment. Other Imperial forces operating in the same theater begin to notice the Dark Angels' unusual behavior. There are questions about why the Dark Angels have suddenly redirected their efforts away from apparently more important objectives. There are inquiries about what has prompted such a massive commitment of resources to what appears to be a minor, Ork-held territory. The Dark Angels deflect these questions with their characteristic evasiveness, offering vague responses about chapter business and recovery of sacred relics. Most Imperial commanders, familiar with the Dark Angel's reputation for secrecy, shrug and move on. But some, particularly those with inquisitorial connections, file away these observations for later consideration. The Dark Angels don't care about the political complications their actions might be creating. They don't care if their behavior seems suspicious to outsiders. All that matters is the mission. Find the Dreadnought, recover it if possible, destroy it if necessary, but under no circumstances allow it to remain in enemy hands or fall into anyone else's possession. After days of searching, the Ravenwing finally gets a break. A reconnaissance squadron spots unusual energy emissions from a particularly large Ork settlement on the planet's northern continent. The signature is consistent with a Dreadnought power plant, though the readings are oddly distorted, possibly indicating modification to the original systems. The location is deep within Ork territory, surrounded by multiple layers of crude fortifications and what appears to be a significant Ork military presence. The information is transmitted immediately to the Strike Force Command. The Supreme Grand Master, who has been personally overseeing operations from aboard the Rock, reviews the intelligence and makes his decision. This is the target. The Deathwing will deploy immediately, supported by Ravenwing elements and whatever tactical support can be provided. The objective is clear: Penetrate the Ork defenses, locate the Dreadnought, and secure or destroy it before the Orks can deploy it or move it elsewhere. This is going to be costly. The Dark Angels know it. The Orks, through sheer luck or cunning, have positioned their prize in a location that's heavily defended and difficult to approach. But the alternative, leaving the Dreadnought in their hands, is unacceptable. Orders are given, forces are marshaled, and the Dark Angels prepare to do what they do best: prosecute war with absolute, uncompromising efficiency in service to objectives that only they fully understand. In the privacy of his chambers aboard the Rock, the Supreme Grand Master offers a prayer to the Emperor and to the memory of Lion L. Johnson, the Primarch who founded the First Legion 10,000 years ago. He prays for the success of the mission, for the safety of his warriors, and most of all, for the deliverance of the ancient warrior trapped in that corrupted shell. He prays that they'll be in time, that the warrior can be recovered and reconsecrated, restored to his proper place in the chapter's halls of honor. But he also prepares himself for the more likely outcome. He prepares for the possibility that the only mercy they can offer is the Emperor's peace, a swift end to suffering that has gone on too long. He prepares for the moment when he'll have to add another name to the list of honored dead, another hero whose story will be known only to the inner circle, another secret to be guarded for all time. The hunt is nearing its conclusion. One way or another, the captured Dreadnought's ordeal is about to end. The only question is how and at what cost. The corrupted machine in battle. Before the Dark Angels can execute their recovery operation, the Orks decide to test their new toy. This is perhaps inevitable. Orks cannot resist the urge to see their creations in action, particularly when those creations are as impressive as a modified Dreadnought. Grobkrusha has been eager to demonstrate his handiwork to the local war boss, to show off what he's built and stake his claim to a bigger share of teeth and reputation. The opportunity comes when a nearby Imperial Guard garrison launches a counter-offensive against Ork positions. It's a standard operation, nothing that particularly concerns the Orks, but it provides the perfect opportunity for a field test. Grobkrusha argues successfully that his modified Dreadnought should be deployed to the front lines. The war boss, always eager for bigger and better ways to crush his enemies, agrees. The preparation for deployment is a chaotic affair, as most Ork operations are. The Dreadnought is loaded onto a massive transport vehicle that looks like it should collapse under the weight, but somehow doesn't. Grobkrusha assigns a group of mechs and Gretchen to accompany the machine, ostensibly to make repairs if needed, but really to bask in the glory when it performs spectacularly. Ork boys crowd around, wanting to see the Hume war machine in action, arguing about how many enemies it will kill and whether it will be more fun to watch than the last big explosion. Inside his sarcophagus, the pilot is fully aware of what's about to happen. His sensory systems, corrupted and modified as they are, still provide him with enough information to understand his situation. He's being taken to battle, but not as a loyal servant of the Emperor. He's being deployed as an Ork weapon to fight against Imperial forces. The horror of this realization is almost too much to bear. He's not merely captured. He's not merely modified. He's about to be forced to fight against his own people. He tries to resist. With every fragment of will he possesses, with every prayer he can summon, he tries to shut down his own systems, to refuse the Ork commands being fed through their crude control mechanisms. But the overrides are too strong, or perhaps the machine spirit itself has been too compromised by the Ork modifications. His body, the Dreadnought shell that has been his home for centuries, no longer fully responds to his commands. The transport reaches the battle zone. The sound of combat is already intense, bolter fire mixing with the crack of las rifles and the roar of Ork weapons. The Dreadnought is unloaded, with much shouting and mechanical grinding. Grobkrusha activates it fully, and the pilot finds himself forced into awareness, his systems coming online whether he wills it or not. What he sees through his optical sensors fills him with despair. The battlefield is a mess of shell craters and burning wreckage. Orks are swarming forward in their usual chaotic fashion, shouting and firing wildly. And there, holding a defensive position, are Imperial Guard troops. Human soldiers in flak armor, carrying las rifles, serving the Emperor with the courage that ordinary humans can muster. His targeting systems, corrupted by Ork modifications, are identifying them as enemies. The pilot fights the compulsion to fire. He's a space marine, one of the Emperor's finest, and he will not be made to kill Imperial servants. But the Ork control mechanisms are insistent, feeding commands directly into his motor systems, overriding his resistance. His weapons arm begins to move, tracking targets among the guard positions. His ammunition feeds activate, loading shells into chambers he no longer fully controls. Then his weapons fire. The sound is wrong, distorted by Ork modifications, but the effects are all too effective. His assault cannon, now modified into some sort of Ork mega shooter, roars to life. Shells tear across the battlefield, impacting among the guard positions. Men die, their bodies torn apart by munitions fired from what appears to be a Space Marine Dreadnought. Inside his shell, the pilot experiences a new level of horror. He's not just watching this happen, he's being forced to participate. His targeting systems are being used to identify victims. His weapons are being fired through his fire control systems. It's his body, his machine, his shell doing this, even as every fiber of his being screams in protest. He's become what every loyal warrior of the Imperium fears most, a weapon turned against his own side. The Imperial Guard troops, for their part, are terrified and confused. They're trained to recognize threats, and a Dreadnought usually means Space Marine support. But this Dreadnought is painted in garish Ork colors, festooned with crude decorations, and it's advancing alongside Ork forces. Some of the more experienced soldiers realize what they're looking at, a captured and corrupted Space Marine war machine. The horror of this realization spreads quickly through the ranks. The Guard commander, acting on training and desperation, calls for anti-armor support. Las cannons swing to target the approaching Dreadnought. Missile launchers load anti-tank warheads. The Guard knows they're probably about to die, but they'll go down fighting, and maybe they can take this desecrated war machine with them. The Dreadnought continues its advance, and the pilot is helpless to stop it. His legs move with the lurching gait that characterizes these walkers, but the movement is wrong, corrupted by Ork modifications and control overrides. His weapons continue to fire, now targeting heavy weapons teams, now suppressing infantry positions. He's doing exactly what a Dreadnought should do in battle, providing fire support and breaking enemy positions, except he's doing it for the Orks. The psychological damage this inflicts on the pilot cannot be overstated. Space Marines are conditioned to be loyal unto death. Their entire existence revolves around service to the Emperor and their chapter. Being forced to act against these imperatives, to be turned into a weapon against fellow servants of the Imperium, breaks something fundamental in the warrior's psyche. If he survives this, if he's somehow recovered and restored, the spiritual and psychological scars will be permanent. Las cannon fire lances out, striking the Dreadnought's armor. The Ork modifications, crude as they look, prove surprisingly effective at absorbing damage. Armor plates that shouldn't work together somehow distribute the impact. Systems that should fail under such stress continue operating. It's the War field, at work, making the impossible possible through sheer collective belief. The pilot feels the impacts, feels the damage alerts pinging through his systems, but his shell keeps moving, keeps fighting. A missile impacts near his main sensor cluster, temporarily blinding him. In those few seconds of darkness, he allows himself to hope that maybe this is it. Maybe the Guard will succeed in destroying him, ending this nightmare. But Ork repairs are faster than they should be. Gretchen scramble over the damaged sections, welding and hammering even while under fire. His vision returns, distorted and glitchy, but functional enough to continue the assault. The battle continues for what feels like hours, but is probably only minutes. The Dreadnought, supported by waves of Ork boys, pushes into the Guard positions. Trenches are overrun. Defensive emplacements are destroyed. The pilot is forced to witness it all, forced to participate, his weapons being used to kill men who look up at him with faces mixing terror and betrayal. Some of them probably recognize that this is a Space Marine Dreadnought, might even know it's a Dark Angels machine from the remnants of its original livery that the Orks didn't fully cover. They're being killed by what should be their greatest defenders. Finally, mercifully, the battle ends. The guard position is overrun, the survivors fleeing or being captured. The Dreadnought stands amid the carnage it has helped create, its armor scored with damage but still operational. Around it, Orks celebrate their victory, whooping and hollering, looting the dead, arguing over who killed the most humies. Grob Crucier is particularly pleased, his modifications having proven effective. The war boss is impressed, already planning how to use this new weapon in future battles. But for the pilot, there is no victory, no satisfaction, only a deep, abiding horror at what he's been made to do. His Vox systems, damaged in the fighting, emit sounds that might be sobs or screams, distorted beyond recognition by Ork modifications. No one is listening. The Orks don't care about the suffering of the thing inside their weapon. They just care that it works, that it kills their enemies, that it's fun to watch in action. As the Dreadnought is being prepared for transport back to the Ork camp, something unexpected happens. The pilot, driven by desperation, and perhaps some reserve of strength he didn't know he possessed, manages to override the Ork controls for just a moment. His Vox systems clear briefly, and he broadcasts on emergency Imperial frequencies. It's just a few words, barely coherent, spoken in the mechanical rasp that passes for his voice. "I am Brother Ancient, Dark Angels, defiled, destroy me, Emperor's mercy." The message is brief, immediately cut off as the Ork control mechanisms reassert themselves. But it's broadcast, sent out into the void, where it might be heard by someone, anyone, who can do something about this situation. It's a desperate plea from a warrior who has been pushed beyond his limits, beyond what any training or conditioning prepared him for. It's a request for the one mercy that can still be offered: death. Unknown to the pilot or the Orks, that message is received. A Ravenwing reconnaissance unit, monitoring Imperial frequencies as part of their search pattern, picks up the transmission. The garbled words are immediately analyzed, the voice patterns compared to chapter records. Within minutes, the Dark Angels have confirmation not only of the Dreadnought's location, but also of its operational status. The message tells them everything they need to know. Their brother still lives, still resists, and desperately wants to be freed from his torment. The response is immediate. Orders are updated. Timeframes are compressed. The planned recovery operation becomes an urgent rescue mission with a grim secondary objective. If they can't save him, they must grant him the peace he's begging for. The Dark Angels mobilize with renewed purpose, their determination sharpened by the knowledge that their brother is suffering and needs them. For the Orks, the successful field test of their modified Dreadnought means they'll want to use it again. They're already planning its next deployment, arguing about which battle would be most fun, which enemies would be most entertaining to crush with their new toy. They don't realize that they've just painted a target on their position, that an entire chapter of Space Marines is about to descend on them with single-minded determination to recover what they've stolen. The corrupted machine is returned to the Ork camp, where it will wait for its next deployment. Inside his sarcophagus, the pilot drifts in and out of consciousness, his mind struggling to process what he's been forced to do. The psychological damage compounds with the physical trauma of his wounds and the horror of his corruption. He's broken in ways that can never fully heal, even if he's somehow recovered. But he clings to one hope, that his battle brothers heard his plea, that they're coming, and that they'll do what needs to be done. The final confrontation. The Dark Angels' strike force approaches the Ork position under cover of darkness. Though on this particular world, darkness is relative, given the perpetual fires and industrial glow that characterizes Ork settlements. The plan has been refined through multiple iterations, incorporating intelligence from Ravenwing reconnaissance and tactical assessments from the strike force's most experienced commanders. This is not a standard combat operation. This is a surgical strike with one objective: locate and secure or destroy the captured Dreadnought. The Deathwing forms the core of the assault force. 40 Terminators, all veterans of countless battles, all privy to the Inner Circle's secrets, all understanding exactly what's at stake. They're teleporting directly into the heart of the Ork position, materializing in flashes of reality-tearing energy within meters of their target. It's high risk, the kind of assault that could go catastrophically wrong if the intelligence is even slightly off, or if the Orks have moved their prize. But the Dark Angels have calculated that speed and surprise are more important than caution. Supporting the Deathwing insertion are elements of the Ravenwing, positioned at key points around the Ork settlement. Their role is to cut off escape routes, to prevent the Orks from moving the Dreadnought during the assault, and to provide extraction support once the objective is secured. Additional Dark Angels forces are prepared to deploy if the situation demands it, but the initial assault is intentionally limited. Too many warriors teleporting in at once risks alerting the Orks before the Deathwing can reach their target. In orbit, aboard the Rock, the Supreme Grand Master monitors the operation personally. Beside him stands the Master of Sanctity, the chapter's senior chaplain, his skull-faced helmet, a grim reminder of the potential outcome of this mission. If the Dreadnought cannot be recovered intact, if the pilot's suffering cannot be ended any other way, it will fall to the chaplains to perform the necessary rites and speak the necessary words over a fallen brother. The assault begins at the appointed hour. The Deathwing Terminators materialize in the workshops and storage areas where intelligence suggests the Dreadnought is being held. The teleport is accurate, placing them within meters of the target location, but the Orks are not completely unprepared. Grob Crucier, paranoid as all successful mechs learn to be, has posted guards around his prized creation. Not many, because he doesn't want to share credit for it with too many boys, but enough to raise an alarm. The moment the Terminators appear, battle is joined. Storm bolters roar in the confined space of the Ork workshops, each bolt round tearing through crude Ork armor with contemptuous ease. Power fists and thunderhammers rise and fall, crushing green bodies with brutal efficiency. The Deathwing moves with precision that comes from millennia of training and experience, each Terminator knowing his role, trusting his brothers to cover his flanks, focused entirely on the mission. The Orks, for their part, respond with typical fury. The alarm is raised immediately, bringing more boys running from all directions. The workshops, cluttered with scrap metal and half-finished projects, become a maze of close-quarters combat. Orks pour through doorways and over barricades, some armed with shooters, others with massive choppers or power claws. They don't care that they're fighting Space Marine Terminators. They're just happy to have a good scrap. But the Deathwing are not here to engage in prolonged combat. They're here for one specific objective. A squad pushes forward, using their mass and firepower to clear a path toward where intelligence suggested the Dreadnought would be. The resistance is fierce. Orks might be crude and unsophisticated, but they're tough and numerous. And in the tight confines of their own camp, they have the advantage of knowing the terrain. Then they find it. Through a blasted doorway, in a cleared area that serves as both workshop and storage, stands the corrupted Dreadnought. The Dark Angels, who see it, experience a moment of visceral shock. This was once a proud war machine of their chapter, painted in their colors, bearing their symbols. Now it's a mockery, covered in Ork modifications, painted in garish colors, festooned with crude glyphs and decorations. It looks wrong in ways that go beyond the merely physical. It looks violated. The Dreadnought is active but not moving. Its power systems are running at low levels, and its weapons are pointed at the floor. For a moment, the Dark Angels hope that maybe they've arrived in time, that the pilot is still resisting, that the machine hasn't been deployed yet. Then the Ork control mechanisms activate, probably triggered by the combat sensors detecting the assault, and the Dreadnought begins to move. This is the moment every Dark Angel's warrior present has been dreading. Their brother, trapped in that corrupted shell, being forced to act against them. The Dreadnought's weapons systems activate, tracking toward the Terminators. The pilot inside is screaming through his Vox speakers, garbled warnings mixed with desperate pleas. But the machine continues its hostile actions regardless. The Deathwing squad leader makes a split-second decision. They cannot destroy the Dreadnought without first attempting to disable the Ork control systems. To do otherwise would be to murder their brother without even trying to save him. He barks orders, and the squad adjusts its tactics. Instead of overwhelming firepower directed at the Dreadnought itself, they focus on the surrounding Orks and the crude control mechanisms that Grob Crucier has installed. A tech marine, part of the assault force specifically for this eventuality, rushes forward even as Stormbolter fire clears the space around him. He can see the Ork modifications now, crude override systems welded onto the Dreadnought's armor, control cables running to makeshift control stations. It's a typically Orkish solution. Rather than properly integrate with the machine's existing systems, they've just added their own layer on top, forcing their will onto the machine through sheer brute force control mechanisms. The tech marine begins working immediately, his servo arms extending to access the Dreadnought's systems, while his own weapons remain ready to defend himself. Behind him, the rest of the Deathwing forms a protective semicircle, holding off increasingly desperate Ork counterattacks. The Orks realize something important is happening, even if they don't fully understand what. More and more of them pour into the area, determined to protect their prize. Then Grob Crucier himself arrives, bellowing in rage at seeing his creation under attack. He's accompanied by his best mechs and a mob of particularly large and mean-looking knobs. The big mech is carrying what appears to be a custom mega blaster cobbled together from multiple heavy weapons, and he opens fire immediately, sending bolts of unstable energy crackling across the workshop. The battle intensifies. The Deathwing are outnumbered, but individually far superior to their enemies. Each Terminator is a match for dozens of Orks, their Stormbolters never stopping, their power weapons rising and falling in deadly arcs. But the Orks keep coming, and the confined space limits the Deathwing's mobility advantages. This is becoming the kind of grinding melee that even Terminators can lose if it goes on too long. The tech marine is making progress, but it's slow. The Ork systems are resistant to his attempts to access them, not because they're sophisticated, but because they're so crude and haphazard that there's no logical way to interface with them. He's having to physically cut connections, trace power flows, and guess at which components are actually doing what. All while the Dreadnought itself continues attempting to target his brothers, its weapons tracking and firing even as the pilot inside fights desperately to regain control. The squad leader makes another decision. If they can't quickly disable the control systems, they'll need to immobilize the Dreadnought by other means. He orders concentrated fire on the Walker's legs and power plant. Not enough to destroy it, but enough to disable its mobility and offensive capabilities. It's a calculated risk. Too much damage, and they might kill their brother instead of saving him. But allowing the corrupted machine to continue fighting endangers the entire mission. Stormbolters focus their fire. Power fists strike at knee joints. A thunderhammer wielded by a particularly skilled Terminator slams into the Dreadnought's left leg with tremendous force, damaging the articulation enough to impair movement. The Dreadnought staggers, its gait becoming even more unstable. Inside, the pilot experiences new damage alerts, new pain signals being translated through his corrupted neural interfaces. But he also senses that these are his brothers attacking him, trying to stop him from being used as a weapon against them. The realization brings a complex mix of relief and horror. Grob Crucier sees his creation being attacked and goes into a frenzy. He charges forward, his mega blaster firing wildly, his mechs trying to reach their prize project to defend or repair it. But the Deathwing are prepared for this. Several Terminators break off from the main group, intercepting the big mech and his entourage. The combat becomes a swirling melee of power armor against Ork brutality. The Tech Marine finally achieves a breakthrough. He manages to access the Dreadnought's core systems, bypassing the Ork overrides through a combination of technical expertise and sacred rituals known only to the Adeptus Mechanicus. With a few deft manipulations and a prayer to the Omnissiah, he begins severing the Ork control mechanism's connections to the Dreadnought's motor functions and weapons systems. Inside his sarcophagus, the pilot suddenly feels the external controls releasing their grip. It's not complete, not immediate, but it's there. For the first time since his capture, his own will is beginning to reassert dominance over his shell's actions. His weapons, which had been tracking Dark Angel's Terminators under Ork commands, freeze in place as he forces them to stop. His legs, which had been moving to position him for optimal firing solutions, lock up as he refuses to take another step toward his brothers. The Dreadnought speaks, and this time, it's clearly the pilot's voice, not filtered through Ork modifications or distorted by external controls. The words emerge from his Vox speakers in a rasp that speaks of long suffering and damage, but they're his words. Brothers, I am still here. I still serve. The effect on the Deathwing is immediate and profound. These are warriors who have seen horrors that would break lesser beings, who have maintained their composure through decades or centuries of warfare. But hearing their ancient brother speak, hearing him assert his identity and his loyalty despite everything that's been done to him, moves them in ways that nothing else could. They fight with renewed fury, determined now not just to complete the mission, but to save their brother from this nightmare. The Tech Marine works faster, cutting away more of the Ork modifications, restoring more of the Dreadnought's original function. It's delicate work, made more difficult by the ongoing combat, but he's gaining confidence. The Dreadnought's machine spirit, suppressed and confused for so long, begins to reassert itself as well. The systems start responding more cleanly, more predictably. The Walker is far from fully restored, but it's regaining some measure of its former self. Grobkrusher, seeing his masterwork being dismantled, howls in rage and tries to push through to stop the Tech Marine. But he's blocked by two Deathwing Terminators who have taken it upon themselves to ensure the big mech doesn't interfere. The combat between them is brutal. Grobkrusher's Mega Blaster manages to damage one Terminator's armor before jamming, as Ork weapons often do at the worst possible times. He switches to a massive Power Claw, the kind of crude but effective weapon that can tear through even Terminator armor with enough force behind it. The fight is brief but savage. The Terminators work in concert, one drawing the mech's attention while the other strikes from an angle. A power sword finds a gap in Grobkrusher's armor, punching through the crude bionics and meat beneath. The big mech roars, manages to clip one of the Terminators with his claw, tearing away an arm at the shoulder, but the other Terminator's thunderhammer comes down with final force, crushing the mech's skull and ending his resistance. With their leader dead, many of the Orks begin to lose cohesion. Some continue fighting, too caught up in the frenzy to notice or care. Others begin to retreat, looking for new leadership or just deciding this particular scrap isn't worth it anymore. The Deathwing press their advantage, pushing the Orks back, establishing a secure perimeter around the Dreadnought. The Tech Marine completes his work as much as is possible in these field conditions. The Ork control systems are disabled, cut away, or bypassed. The Dreadnought's original systems have been restored to at least partial functionality. It's not perfect. There's extensive damage that will require weeks or months of work back aboard the Rock to fully repair. But the machine is responding to its pilot again, obeying his commands rather than external overrides. The pilot tries to speak again, to thank his rescuers, to express what he's feeling, but the words won't come. The trauma of his ordeal has been too severe. His mind, conditioned to withstand almost anything, has been pushed beyond what conditioning can handle. He's free, or at least freer than he was, but he's not whole. The psychological scars will take longer to heal than any physical damage, if they ever heal at all. The Deathwing squad leader assesses the situation. The Dreadnought can move, though its gait is unstable due to battle damage and Ork modifications. The pilot is responsive to commands and can apparently exercise some control over his systems. The immediate area is secure, though more Orks will be coming soon. They need to extract now, before this turns into a prolonged engagement that could result in the Dreadnought being damaged beyond recovery. He gives the orders. The Ravenwing is signaled to begin the extraction protocol. The Deathwing forms up around the Dreadnought, creating a moving fortress that will protect their rescued brother as they fight their way to the extraction point. The pilot, still dazed and traumatized, complies with movement commands, his corrupted shell lurching forward on damaged legs, supported by Terminators on either side. The extraction is not clean or easy. Orks continue to attack, drawn by the noise and chaos. The Dark Angels fight a running battle, moving steadily toward the extraction point while fending off increasingly desperate Ork assaults. The Dreadnought, despite his damaged state, contributes to the fighting, his weapons firing at targets designated by the Deathwing. Each shot he fires at the Orks, each enemy he destroys, is a small reclamation of his honor, a tiny piece of himself restored through action against those who desecrated him. They reach the extraction point, a cleared area where Ravenwing elements have established a defensive perimeter. Thunderhawk gunships roar down through smoke and fire, their assault cannons clearing the immediate area of Orks. The Dreadnought is loaded aboard with difficulty. He was never designed to fit in standard transport compartments, and the damage to his frame makes the process even more challenging. But the Dark Angels make it work through determination and desperation. As the Thunderhawks lift off, leaving the Ork settlement behind, the pilot finally allows himself to believe that he's actually been rescued. The nightmare isn't over, not completely, but this phase of it is ending. He's back with his brothers. He's no longer in enemy hands. Whatever comes next, whatever punishment or restoration awaits him, at least he's among those who understand what he's endured. The cost of the operation is tallied as the strike force withdraws. 3 Deathwing Terminators dead, several more wounded. Numerous Ravenwing casualties from the supporting operations. Ammunition and equipment expended in quantities that will take time to replenish. By any normal measure, the cost was significant for the recovery of a single damaged war machine. But the Dark Angels don't measure success in normal terms. They measure it in secrets kept, in honor maintained, in brothers rescued from fates worse than death. By that measure, the operation was successful. They recovered one of their ancients from captivity. They prevented a chapter secret from potentially being exposed. They granted a suffering warrior the salvation he'd been begging for, not through death, but through rescue. The cost, whatever it was worth it. Aftermath and restoration. The journey back to the rock is long, and during it, the pilot remains conscious but largely uncommunicative. Tech priests and tech marines work continuously on his systems, trying to stabilize the damage, remove the most offensive Ork modifications, and restore basic functionality to systems that have been corrupted. But their work is complicated by the sheer extent of the changes made to the Dreadnought. The Orks, in their crude way, have actually managed to integrate some modifications so thoroughly that removing them might cause more damage than leaving them in place. Upon arrival at the rock, the Dreadnought is taken directly to the Fortress Monastery's most secure fabrication chambers. These are places where the chapter's most sacred war machines are maintained and repaired, where secrets can be kept, and where only the most trusted servants are permitted. The pilot is not released from his sarcophagus immediately. That would be too dangerous given the state of his systems. Instead, the entire Dreadnought is secured in place, surrounded by equipment, servitors, and specialists who begin the painstaking process of restoration. The Supreme Grand Master visits personally, standing before the damaged war machine and speaking words of comfort and reassurance. He thanks the ancient warrior for his endurance, for his continued loyalty despite everything he suffered. He promises that the chapter will do everything in its power to restore him, to cleanse the corruption from his shell and purify the machine spirit that has been so violated. And he assures the pilot that what happened was not his fault, that no shame will attach to him for the actions he was forced to perform under Ork control. These words matter more than the Supreme Grand Master might realize. The pilot has been blaming himself, as Space Marines are conditioned to do, for his capture, for his failure to resist the Ork modifications, for every action he was forced to perform while under their control. Hearing the chapter's highest authority explicitly absolve him of responsibility provides a measure of psychological relief, though it cannot erase the trauma of what he experienced. The restoration process takes months. Every system must be examined, tested, and often replaced or rebuilt from scratch. The Ork modifications are carefully removed, with Tech Marines and Adeptus Mechanicus specialists arguing over each decision. Some modifications, particularly to the armor plating and structural supports, are deemed acceptable to keep after proper reconsecration. Others, particularly anything involving the control systems or weapons mechanisms, are completely removed and replaced with proper Imperial components. The most delicate work involves the sarcophagus itself and the pilot's neural interfaces. The Orks' crude control mechanisms forced connections and overrides that damaged some of the original interfacing. Repairing this requires accessing the sarcophagus itself, which means temporarily shutting down the life support systems and working quickly before the pilot's biological components suffer irreversible damage. It's dangerous work, but it's necessary if the Dreadnought is to ever function properly again. During this process, the pilot is intermittently conscious. Sometimes he's aware of what's being done to him, feeling the work being performed on his systems through his neural connections. Other times he's placed in a medically induced stasis to allow more invasive procedures to be completed without causing unnecessary trauma. But even in his unconscious states, his mind is troubled by nightmares and flashbacks to his time in Ork captivity. Interrogator chaplains visit regularly, not to interrogate, but to provide spiritual counseling and support. They listen as the pilot describes his experiences, allow him to voice his fears and doubts, and guide him through the process of accepting and integrating what happened to him. This is unfamiliar territory, even for these experienced spiritual leaders. They've counseled warriors through countless traumas, but being captured, corrupted, and forced to fight against the Imperium is something beyond even their extensive experience. One particular chaplain, ancient and wise, eventually helps the pilot understand something crucial: that his continued resistance, even in his powerless state, even when forced to act against his will, was itself a form of victory. The Orks never broke him, never made him accept what was done to him, never corrupted his loyalty. He was trapped and used, yes, but he remained himself, remained a dark angel, remained loyal to the Emperor. That resistance, that refusal to surrender, even when surrender might have been easier, is itself a kind of heroism. As the physical restoration progresses, the psychological healing begins, though it will never be complete. The pilot learns to live with what happened, to accept it as part of his service, to understand it as another trial he has endured in the Emperor's name. He will never forget, never fully heal, but he will continue to serve. Because that's what Dreadnoughts do. They serve until they can serve no more, through whatever trials and tribulations fate brings them. After months of work, the Dreadnought is finally deemed ready for reconsecration. The ceremony is conducted in one of the Rock's most sacred chambers, in the presence of the inner circle and the chapter's highest-ranking officers. Chaplains perform rites of purification, anointing the restored armor with holy oils and speaking prayers that have been spoken over Dark Angel's war machines for 10,000 years. The machine spirit is blessed, rededicated to the Emperor's service, and bound once again to its rightful purpose. The pilot speaks, his voice carrying through newly restored Vox systems, taking renewed oaths of loyalty to the Emperor, the chapter, and the Primarch. He swears that he will continue to serve, will carry the shame of what happened but not be defined by it, will honor those who rescued him by fighting with renewed dedication. The ceremony is moving in ways that few Dark Angels ceremonies are, because everyone present understands the significance of what's being celebrated. The return of a lost brother from a fate that should have been inescapable. The Dreadnought is assigned a new designation and given time to retrain, to relearn his systems now that they've been restored to proper function. The process is frustrating. His muscle memory, such as it is for a Dreadnought pilot, has to relearn movements without the corruption of Ork overrides. He has to rebuild trust in his own systems, to believe that when he commands an action, the action will be executed as intended rather than being hijacked by external controls. Eventually, he's cleared for combat deployment. The first battle after his restoration is a carefully chosen engagement against Orks on a different world. It's a small operation, nothing too challenging, designed to allow him to prove to himself that he can function effectively. When he once again wades into combat, his weapons speaking with their familiar thunder, his shell moving with something approaching its original grace, he experiences a catharsis that no counseling could provide. He's fighting Orks again, but this time on his own terms, under his own control, serving his chapter as he was always meant to. The first Ork his weapons destroy brings a savage satisfaction that surprises him with its intensity. For every Ork that falls before his assault cannon, for every crude vehicle his power fist crushes, he's taking back a piece of what was stolen from him. He's not just fighting the enemy, he's reclaiming his honor, his identity, his sense of self. The battle is brief but decisive, and when it ends, he stands amid the wreckage, feeling something he hasn't felt since before his capture: pride. But the scars remain, both physical and psychological. Some of the Ork modifications, particularly to his armor and structural components, were deemed too integrated to remove completely. They've been reconsecrated and blessed, but they're still there, permanent reminders of what happened. And in his quieter moments, when he's between battles and has time to think, the pilot still experiences flashbacks to his time in captivity, still feels phantom sensations of Ork controls overriding his will. The chapter understands this. His brothers treat him with a combination of respect and care, honoring him for his endurance, while understanding that he's not the same warrior he was before. The inner circle debates whether his knowledge of chapter secrets might have been compromised during his captivity, whether he can still be trusted with the most sensitive information. Eventually, they decide that his resistance and recovery prove his loyalty beyond doubt, and he retains his full status and knowledge. Years pass, then decades. The pilot continues his service, participating in countless battles, earning new honors, adding to his already impressive record of achievements. But he never forgets what happened to him. In some ways, his ordeal makes him a better warrior, more empathetic to the suffering of others, more determined to protect his brothers from similar fates. He becomes known for his particular hatred of Orks, pursuing them with a fury that goes beyond mere duty. And whenever the chapter recovers one of its own from enemy hands, whenever they execute an operation to reclaim a captured warrior or war machine, this ancient Dreadnought volunteers immediately. He knows what it's like to be in enemy hands, to suffer corruption and desecration, to feel that your brothers might have abandoned you. He knows the importance of recovery operations, understands viscerally why the chapter spends such resources on retrieving even a single lost warrior, and he's determined that no other Dark Angel's brother will suffer what he suffered, not while he still has the power to prevent it. Conclusion. The tale of what happens when Orks capture a Dark Angel's Dreadnought is ultimately a story of horror, endurance, and redemption. It's a narrative that captures the essential grim darkness of the Warhammer 40,000 universe, where there are no easy victories, where heroism is measured in suffering endured and duty maintained despite impossible circumstances. For the Dark Angels, this scenario represents one of their worst nightmares. Not just the loss of a valuable war machine, not just the death of an honored warrior, but the capture and corruption of one of their ancients by enemies who understand nothing of honor or sanctity. The chapter's response, immediate and overwhelming, demonstrates the lengths they'll go to recover their own, the resources they'll commit, and the prices they'll pay to maintain their honor and protect their secrets. For the Orks, capturing a Space Marine Dreadnought represents the ultimate salvage operation. It's a trophy that brings status, a prize that demonstrates cunning and strength, and a toy that's immensely fun to play with. The Orks don't understand or care about the significance of what they've captured to their enemies. They just see a really cool war machine that they can make even better by adding more weapons and painting it proper Orky. The pilot at the center of this story endures trials that would break almost anyone else. Captured, corrupted, forced to act against his own people, he experiences a level of violation and helplessness that Space Marine conditioning never prepared him for. But through it all, he maintains his identity, his loyalty, and his will to resist. His suffering is profound, but his endurance is equally remarkable. The rescue operation showcases the Dark Angels at their finest, determined, skilled, willing to pay any price to achieve their objectives. They don't abandon their own. They don't accept unacceptable losses. When one of their brothers is in enemy hands, they move heaven and earth to bring him home or grant him peace. This is what makes them one of the Imperium's most formidable chapters, and also what makes their internal conflicts over their hidden shame so tragic. The aftermath, the long process of restoration and healing, reminds us that in the 41st millennium, even victories come with lasting costs. The pilot is rescued and restored, but he's not unchanged. The scars, both physical and psychological, remain. He continues to serve, continues to fulfill his duty, but he does so knowing what it's like to be helpless, to be used as a weapon against his own side, to suffer without hope of relief. This scenario exemplifies what makes Warhammer 40,000 such a compelling setting. It takes seriously the consequences of its conflicts. It doesn't offer easy resolutions or happy endings. The Dark Angels pilot is rescued, yes, but at great cost and with permanent consequences. The Orks are defeated, but they don't understand why anyone is so upset about a piece of captured equipment. The Imperium continues its endless wars, and this is just one small incident among countless thousands happening across the galaxy. If you've made it this far in our exploration of what happens when Orks capture a Dark Angel's Dreadnought, thank you for joining us on this dark journey through one of the 40k universe's most horrifying scenarios. If you found this examination of lore worthwhile, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. We have many more deep dives into the grim darkness of the far future planned, and your support helps us continue creating this content. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And sometimes, that war creates situations so horrible that they transcend mere combat and become personal nightmares for those unfortunate enough to experience them. The capture of a Dark Angel's Dreadnought by Orks is one of those situations, a convergence of tragedy, violation, and ultimately, a testament to the endurance of the human spirit, even when that spirit is trapped in a shell of adamantium and ceramite. Remember, in this universe, there are no good endings, only different degrees of surviving horror. The Dark Angel's Dreadnought pilot survived, was rescued, and continues to serve. By the standards of the 41st millennium, that's about as close to a happy ending as anyone is likely to get.